Hey y'all, Fat Man Outdoors. I want to do a real quick video with you today, and let's all take a step back in time. In about 1870, the British Empire accepted into the manufacturing of a new military rifle for them. The rifle was originally designed, the action was originally designed by a gentleman named Peabody. And a few years later, just a couple of years later, a Swiss gunmaker named Martini sort of redesigned the receiver just a little bit. And then a couple of years after that, an American gunmaker, Martini Henry, he redesigned the barrel. And when they finally got all that put together the way the military wanted it, they accepted it in as their new mass-produced military rifle. But the Peabody gentleman, his name just kind of got kicked out, and it ended up being the Martini Henry rifle. The military of the British Empire accepted this rifle as their rifle from around 1870 to about 1889. And then around that time, about 1890, 1891, there was some new stuff coming online. Of course, you know, the Mosin showed up about 1891, and then right around in that same time, just a little past that, 303 British. And of course, the 1903 Springfield was also coming online. And so these rifles kind of fell by the wayside. But in that couple of decades that these rifles served with the British military, they had a pretty astute history. If you've ever watched the movie Zulu, you can see how these rifles were used in combat to a very effective state once they kind of figured out how they needed to use them, because this rifle come around in a time of gun making in the world that was sort of like a transition. They weren't exactly muzzle loaders. Okay, they didn't put the powder and the ball and all that down the muzzle of the rifle anymore. They were loading from the breech, but they weren't quite away from big bore muzzle loading rifles, and they weren't quite to the point of smaller caliber breech loading rifles that were repeaters. So this was kind of in that middle area there, and that's why that their life was only just about 20 years. So when the British military finally accepted that they were going to accept the 303 British, and they could see that war was just around the corner, they instituted a decree that all these old rifles be gathered up, melted down, and the metal be used to produce 303 British. And nearly all of them was. There was about 500,000 of these originally produced. I'm going to say there might be 7,000 maybe still left in existence that are in good condition. Now there's some parked guns around and stuff like that, but when they took off as a collector's thing wasn't until the movie Zulu came out, really. So that there wasn't a lot of outcry for them, and a lot of people didn't have them put back. So they nearly all got melted back down and put back into use as 303 British rifles. So there is still a few in existence with International Military Antiques, I think is the name of the company, IMA. They'll run you about $1,300, and there is a catch. If you read their disclaimers, you read the legal part of their disclaimers, it'll tell you that they sell all their rifles as non-shooters. They sell them as all original actual parts, but they do not say that the guns are safe to shoot. So if you buy one of these, investing in it's neat upon itself just to say I've got one and something you can show your friends down the road. But make sure before you go out and start purchasing reloading components for this, dies, ordering brass, getting bullet casts, or buying already cast bullets, powders, different stuff like that, because it's a labor of love to reload this stuff. But don't go start buying that stuff until after you get your rifle, and get some filler gauges and make sure your headspace is good in this and everything's okay, that your barrel's good and all that stuff, because there's a lot of things that could keep these rifles from being shootable, but number one thing will be your headspace. And the way you'll check your headspace, you'll put feeler gauge down in here between the breech face and the bolt, and then see if you can close the bolt. And there's a tolerance you need to be within. You don't want to be able to close that bolt on 10 thousandths. If it'll close on 10 thousandths, then the headspace is too much and it's not safe to shoot. This one, mine is very, very tight. I'm very, very happy with this rifle. Closes on about 3, but you have to squeeze to get it to close on 3. So the headspace is really, really tight. Now, something that they do come with is really neat, is this brass and leather bayonet case, which is really, really, that's awesome that that's still in existence after all this time. But then they come with this really cool bayonet. And this one, see if I can get over where I can read, was made by the Wilkinson Sword Company, London, England, in 1889. And they are really neat piece of history just in itself. I think that's probably walnut handles that are on them, and it's just really neat. But the case that these come in, it's really tight leather, really good shape, really heavy duty leather, nice fitting on the brass and stuff. You know, there's going to be some scratches and dents and dings, because these rifles are not something that were just put up on a shelf somewhere and you buy them that have never been used. These weapons have been in combat. Majority of these rifles probably saw combat on the continent of Africa during the Zulu wars that the British military had with them. The history behind this particular rifle, and probably the only ones you're going to find that are left that you can get a hold of, when all these rifles were being melted down, the government knew how many had been made. There'd been about 500,000 made. Well, there was about 15,000 that they knew had been produced and were somewhere in Nepal, but nobody could find them. Well, a gentleman ended up buying a castle from the royal family in Nepal that they decided they were going to sell off. And when they did, they were cleaning it out. The gentleman that owned it was cleaning it out and selling all the antiques that was in it, and I guess getting it ready for being modernized for them to live in, or whatever they were going to do, whatever people who can afford to buy a freaking castle do, I don't know. But the legend is that they discovered a room in the basement armory of this castle. A gentleman that was over there trying to buy some old webbing gear and canteens and uniforms from that time in the British military. They discovered this room that a copper seal was still on that hadn't been opened. And they obtained permission to open it up, and lo and behold, those 15,000 rifles were all stacked in that room like cordwood in varying states of decay. Some of them, the wood was completely gone, parts were rusted away, they were just, you couldn't even tell what they were. Other ones that were higher up on the stack that hadn't had a lot of moisture get to them were in great shape, some of them, you know, like this, but not a lot of them. About 2,500, 3,000 of them were estimated to come out in really good condition, that were possible that you could maybe get a fireable weapon out of them. So they ended up being bought, they ended up being brought back here to the United States. A company called Atlanta Cutlery had them for the longest time in Atlanta, Georgia. They decided they wanted to let them go, and they got in a deal with the International Military Antiques, and they ended up buying them and taking them up north, and now that's where they've got them. When they first come over here, when that Nepalese cache was first found and brought over here, you could buy these rifles for $600-700, you know, in completely cleaned and complete condition. That's with everything, cleaning rod, whole 9 yards, and everything had been looked over good and cleaned and make sure it had the original parts on it. But now the numbers are getting down where there's not a lot of the complete rifles left, so the prices on them is going up. They're about $1,300 now if you buy them from IMA. You may find some on the private market that are for sale cheaper than that. To be honest, I haven't ever seen anybody that has one for sale. There may be a couple pops up every now and then on Gunbroker, but again, you're going to be buying one that's going to be listed as a non-shooter, and I'm going to bet the majority of the time when one of those is put out, it's probably because that rifle's not safe to shoot, and people want to be able to shoot them and get out. There's actually groups of folks that shoot these things competitively. I met a gentleman that lives in Washington State, that he's the one that I have draw all my brass, because I've got the reloading dies to make the brass from 24 gauge shotgun shell, but it's really labor intensive, and you have to take your time, and I ain't got time for all that. So I had to buy the whole kit, and that die came with the kit. But I had to have the rest of the kit to reload the ammo. But I just go ahead and went and bought 50 pieces of brass off of him. Those 50 pieces of brass will probably last me the rest of my life and the rest of the gun's life, more than likely, because like I say, I'm going to try to deer hunt with it this fall, and then my intent is to retire the old girl and just show her off and maybe shoot her every now and then, because now it is a great big job cleaning one of these up, because it's black powder when you're shooting it. So you got to get that bore cleaned out good and properly cleaned, and don't leave anything in it, and then conditioned back and oiled, and made sure that everything's going to be good when you go back and pull it out of the gun safe again in a year. But this particular model, this is a Mark IV long lever. This is one of the newer ones. This is the later ones that made in 1888. The earlier ones had a shorter lever, and they found when they were using them in combat and firing them a lot, that it was hard sometimes to get that open because you didn't have a lot of leverage with that short lever. So they loaded them with they built them with the longer lever, and if you look on this, they have a little cup right there that the lever actually fits right down in. Pretty neat little fit, even, you know, after all this time. It's got a lot of markings on it. This one has some pretty, I'm sure you're probably going to have a difficult time seeing those, but there's some really neat cartouches on the stock on this rifle. It was made, like I said, in 1888. It has the crown stamping on it. It's made at Enfield. It is a Mark IV. This was a #1 rifle. It's the last time that it went through the armory to be inspected, and every time they would do that, they had to stamp on them the last time they were inspected. This one was inspected in November of 1908, and they also stamp on the stock out here by the armorer who did it, who was the one that inspected it and decided whether it was a #1 or a #2 rifle. Now the #1 and #2 designation comes from that #2 is a fully operational rifle. It just may not have excelled in accuracy. A #2 rifle was just fine. There was no issues with the rifle. It just may not have shot stellarly when they done, well, however they did it back then, 3-shot group, 5-shot group, however they did it. This rifle's original life, when it was originally manufactured, it was stamped as a #2. And I'm assuming maybe the board been shot out on the original barrel or something, and in 1908 when it went through and was through the armory and was recertified, they may have changed the barrel, and when they did, they re-stamped over the 2 with a 1 and stamped the barrel with a 1. So this gun did come out with exceptional accuracy the second time that it went through the armory. Or I say that the last time it went through the armory. I don't know necessarily that it was the second time. But these are really neat old rifles. There's a lot of just really neat colorization, and I've sat down and looked at this thing over and wondered, you know, how that got there, or how this got there, or I wonder what that stain is. You know, there's probably been, without a doubt, there's been human blood spilled with this rifle, without a doubt, and probably with that bayonet. It's a sad thing, but it is what it is. But yeah, I've looked at it a lot, and I've often wondered what may have caused some of the staining on this. There's some streaks on the wood that are black, and a lot of times when blood touches wood like this, it'll turn it black, and it's got a resemblance of some possible places where blood had run down it or something. Maybe that's what it is, maybe it's not, I don't know. I hope it's not, but probably is. But if it was, I hope that person survived. One interesting thing about these things, and this will tell you something about how the military thought about rifles then, the things that were important to them and the things that were not important to them. This rifle's made without a safety. It has no safety at all. The only safety you have is don't have a bullet in the chamber. That's crazy. In a military rifle, instead of being able to walk around with the gun on safe, just don't put a bullet in it. But like I said, it was back during those old days, those old times, when things we don't think about with a second thought now was, they didn't even, it wasn't important at all. You know, they didn't care. So the only thing you have on this is right here, you have a indicator, so that if it's back, it's not pointing up. If it's toward the back, that means it's cocked and it's ready to fire. And then when you pull the trigger, it goes forward and it's standing up and down, and that's to show you that it's decocked. But there's no way to decock it with a round in the chamber, because the only way to decock it is to pull the trigger, so you're going to fire it. Then when you work the lever, it pulls that indicator back to show that the gun, the firing mechanism is cocked again. Now this is, it's an interesting deal. I may one day make a quick video of taking the bolt out of this and showing you the inside of the bolt on this. This is actually striker fired. It's one of the very first striker fired weapons ever was mass produced. Pretty interesting piece. But guys, I really appreciate stuff like this, and it really is something pretty neat to handle. Let's throw a few rounds through it, see how she does. Well, all right, let's put a few rounds down range with this old girl, see how she does. Pull the lever down, insert artillery piece. Close the lever up. She's ready to fire. This gun has no safety. Pull the lever down smartly. Rifle ejects the spent casing. I don't know if you can see it too well. This thing kills on both ends. It's a lot of recoil, and I'm not running the loads pushed up. Factory load for these, for the military load, now I'm sure somebody will probably call me on my numbers, but I think I'm going to be pretty close. I think it was shooting about a 480 grain projectile over grease cookie and fiber wadding combination, 85 grains of black powder, and it's a big old honking round to be putting that much behind. You're talking about, I don't know, probably 1650, 1700 feet a second going down range. Now the bullet that I have here today is a slightly heavier bullet than the original military load, but I'm only going to be pushing it with about 70 grains of black powder. So they do really well. May try in an upcoming video try to do some chronograph work with this load. Just have to catch a day when the wind's blowing the right direction and it's not as sunny as it is today. so that the smoke don't interfere with the chronos and that the sun don't keep it from working good. But they do pretty good. I'm gonna shoot one more and then we'll wrap this thing up. It's a blast to shoot. It's my favorite gun. Well guys, as you can see, these cool old rifles right here, they're just a real neat piece of history. But not only that, if you're a firearms enthusiast like I am, to get a hold of a piece like this, you know, because I don't have unlimited funding to spend on real fancy antique rifles and stuff, but I ran across this one and was able to procure it, and to get a hold of something like this, to have in your collection of firearms and take it out every now and then and make some thunder with it. It's a pretty neat piece. I fully intend to try to deer hunt with this fall, and then I'm going to retire her. You know, the only time she'll come out is maybe every now and then on special occasion to just shoot it a couple times a year. But the history of these rifles is something that is amazing. And like I said, check out that movie Zulu, and you'll get some information about these rifles you didn't know, and you'll see a little bit of the history that they actually played in world politics. You know, I mean, they're a great old piece of history that it's another one of those deals where when what's out there is gone, they're gone. Now, there is still a few of them that's purchasable through International Military Antiques, but now they list all of them as non-shooters. So if you decide to buy one, make sure before you start loading up ammo for this, or even buying the components to load ammo for it, before you put that kind of money into it, get the rifle, get some feeler gauges, check out your head spacing on this thing, make sure it'll be safe to shoot, so that that you can shoot it and have a lot of fun with it. Guys, I've had a blast making this video for you, and telling you a few things about these old rifles, and letting you see her stretch her legs a little and bruise my shoulder. But I'll see y'all in the next video. I'm the Fat Man. I'm gone. Hey guys, if you liked the video, hit subscribe. Don't forget to click that bell so you get notifications the next time we put out a video. Appreciate you. It's the Fat Man. I'm gone.